My name is Tom Cooney, and I am Professor of Entrepreneurship at TU Dublin. Welcome to our series of talks for people with disabilities who are interested in starting their own business. During this series, we will be talking to people with disabilities who have started their own business to discuss their entrepreneurial journeys. We hope that these talks will encourage you to think about starting your own business. Enjoy the conversations. Paul, you're very welcome to this episode.
Thank you very much.
And maybe we can begin by you talking about your background, who you are, where you've come from, and a little bit about your history.
Yeah, so I'm Paul Fitzsimons. I'm a screenwriter and film producer, and I set up my own business, Prelude Content, film production business in 2021. That's 4 years ago, wow, or 3 years ago. So yeah, I actually come from a construction industry background, moved from interior design into project management, and then unfortunately the construction industry had a bit of a fallout in the mid-noughties, in the late noughties, and I went into full-time writing for a while, and then I was commissioned to write a feature film for a director in Kerry, and in addition to writing it, I was brought on to produce it, and I realised that film production is essentially project management by a much fancier name. So I produced that for him, and that came out in 2017. And then I worked as a development producer for a production company in Galway, which basically involved my going out to writers and bringing projects into the company and developing them. But unfortunately, COVID happened a year into that job, so that couldn't last, because there was no production, therefore there was no development, therefore there was no job. But it was actually a blessing in disguise, because it led me to do the TU Dublin Advanced Production postgrad, which I did in 2020 into 2021, which was an absolute eye-opener for me. It was a fantastic course, and that was a year long, and it was during that process when I was studying and I was setting up we had to do a live project basically as part of our course. So in order to do that, I said, well, sure, look, I've been toying with this idea of setting up a production company for some time, so I just bit the bullet and did it, which was great, and said it was a bit of a slow start, and it's very difficult to kind of get financial support, and we can talk about that down the line. But set up the company, and then when I set up the company, then obviously I've made a few contacts in the industry over the years, and people are coming to me with their projects. Some were not so good, some were great, and I basically took on a few projects into development, and the first one that went into production, which took probably a year and a half to really get going. From the time I set up the company to the time I got into it, was about a year and a half. And that film came out, well, it hasn't actually come out commercially yet, but it's finished since last year, and it's done very well on the awards, on the festival circuit, and nominated for 5 IFTAs this year, which we're all very happy with. And then I know I'm currently in pre-production on our next feature film, which is a horror film, which is going to be set in London and shot here in the UK.
And to go from construction out to your current industry is quite a jump, right? So were you always interested in English, in writing? Like when you were in school, was this something that you were good at, or that you had an interest in? Or so how did that jump happen?
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, I used to write these ridiculously silly essays in school, which my English teacher at the time should not have, but did encourage me. That was great. I've also grown up as a bit of an English pedant. My mother is an English teacher, so it was always. I don't remember it ever being drilled into us, but it was always something that I was very keen about. one thing I didn't mention actually, while I was working in the construction industry, I actually wrote a novel, and that was kind of my first foray. Really, I was in a community creative writing group back in the mid noughties when I was still working in construction, and that kind of got me really into the creative writing side. And out of that group came a number of very good writers, and I wrote a novel, and it took forever to get it published. And I wrote it in 2005, and it got published in 2018. So that was kind of my first actual foray into the creative side. And then while I was working in an architecture practice, I even kind of toyed with the idea of doing a movie about the architectural industry, and wrote a few scripts with a colleague in the practice at the time, and we couldn't get it off the ground. But that was my first kind of foray into screenwriting. And then I actually worked on Fair City as a writer for a while, and that kind of opened up some significant doors and introduced me to some of my closest writing friends. So it all kind of came off that kind of thing. I really started off writing, as I said, silly essays when I was 16, all the way up to writing a novel, into writing screenplays.
But that creative writing piece was a hobby rather than an ambition, right?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, obviously I had mad ambitions when I was writing the novel. This is obviously going to win the Booker, even though it was a crime novel. Crime novels never get nominated for the Booker, but I was going to be the breaking force in that. I was going to, but yeah, I mean, I suppose when I got let go from the architectural job, my first kind of decision was, and my parents did not have multiple heart attacks at the time, and they said, I'm going to take a year out. The industry that I'm working in there's nothing in it anymore. So they didn't go completely bananas. They put Dad go and get a job. They said, yeah, fair. So that was my big push, and that was when I wrote the majority of the book, was during that time. But so that was the extent of my creative ambitions at that stage, was to be a novelist and to be a multi-million euro earning one. But they are few and far between. But so that was that kind of it was a hobby, but with certainly ambition that I was going to go further.
And because of the nature of this interview, can I ask, did your disability or the nature of your disability influence your choice of career, or was it irrelevant to what you were going to do?
Well, because I've had the disability since birth, it wasn't an acquired one where I had to make a massive change in direction in my life. I've had things since I was 2 years old. It was a result of no thyroid gland. Therefore, I got jaundice and brain damage. So I've never not had it. So that being the case, my life was always, I never considered myself limited, because I just this was one of the things that I lived with. And everybody in their lives lives with what they have. So I was never going to win Wimbledon. I was never going to drive Formula One cars. But so therefore, my career path was always going to be something either academic or something where I didn't have to stand for a long period of time. So I said I tried. I worked in IT for a while, and then I went to college while part-time while I was working in IT to get my first architectural qualification. And so all those kind of jobs were creative, in nature, because they were jobs I could do sitting down. And similarly, then when it skewed from architectural design into creative writing and film production, again, they're jobs that I can do for the majority from a desk. When you're on set and you're spending 3 to 4 weeks or 5 weeks, whatever it is, on a film set, you're not necessarily sitting down as much. But again, my job is to be the producer, so my job during the shoot is to get out of the way. So I don't necessarily need to be there. I would be there at least twice a day to make sure everything's on track, to make sure everyone's happy, and I would bring a big bag of chocolate for everyone. It makes them very happy. But again, so even during a shoot, apart from being on set a couple of times a day, I would get out of the way and I would go back to my office and work.
The film TV world is quite difficult because it's full of ups and downs in terms of jobs. How have you found, processing that in terms of your work schedule, in terms of bringing in money? And it's a challenging industry.
Very, very challenging. And it's kind of, I'm a bit of an outlier from that point of view, because apart from, I really only worked in one job in a company within the film industry. I said I did a spell as a writer on Fair City, but that was more a block of time that you're in there for. In my case, it was a month or 2 months, and then the rest of the time, so I was working for a company. But again, it was kind of different in that I was working from home because they were Galway based and I was Dublin based at the time. So I was from the point of view of my workload, I was kind of self-employed because I was operating essentially my own department within the company, and I reported into them, but I wasn't going to a place of business. And I was earning at the time, and that was nice to have an earning job in the film industry. But the rest of the time, just because of my nature, I said I'm an entrepreneur at heart, really. So, but the downside, as you said, to being an entrepreneur is that trying to bring in money is quite the challenge. And I have essentially been running my business up to now off my savings. And I also kind of took some sacrifices in that I rented out my apartment and I moved back in with my mother. And that was largely, not purely, but largely a financial consideration, because I wanted to do this, and finding, investment is not next to impossible, very difficult, particularly in this industry. So I have essentially been living off the rent of my apartment and whatever savings I have. Ideally, my next project and my next couple of projects will actually bring revenue in, but it is very difficult to actually get outside investment into a startup, because even if you're a professional who's been doing that job in different companies for a while, it is still quite difficult to get an investor or another company to believe in you to the point where they'll actually invest hard money into it.
And one of the challenges I perceive, right, and you can help me on this one, but with the TV and film world, is that effectively every film or TV series, right, is a startup in its own right? So because a movie is a startup, right, and then it finishes and that's it, right? If you're creating a new TV program, that's a startup. So each of those requires startup funding. Is that correct? Is that how you would see it?
But I suppose I wouldn't see each project as a startup in that each project is a project within a company, in the same way that building is a building within a construction company. But you do have to start. You're right when you say you do start from scratch with the various phases of TV production or film production, from the development phase through pre-production, through the shoot, through the post-production phase, and then selling it or getting it onto TV. So from that point of view, you are starting at zero and building from there. But also you're not, because you're starting with the experience of the producer. You're bringing in people into the team. You're not doing this in a vacuum. You're obviously growing a team, and you're bringing in people that you trust, and the people that you worked with on project one you're going to bring on that worked well. You're going to bring on to project two, and so forth. So from that point of view, thankfully you're not starting at zero every time. And the more experience you get, the more possibly the more steps that you can bypass. But each project still has to go through those 4 or 5 steps of its life: development, pre-production, production, post-production, and sale. But thankfully you're not starting at zero, because I don't think anyone would do it if we all had to start at absolute zero every time.
Yeah.
It'd be a challenge a lot. Wouldn't people?
But I suspect people have the perception of the film industry being Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson in a Sheeran movie, right? But most films that are happening in the country in any given year would be small independent type productions. Would that be correct?
Yeah, and the Colin Farrell Banshees of Inisherin is a very important film for Irish cinema. It's not technically an Irish film because it's a studio movie essentially, but it's a very important project for Irish cinema because it is shot in Ireland. Therefore, it uses Irish cast, Irish crew, Irish people, Irish resources. But yeah, for the most part, the Irish films that we're seeing, or maybe not seeing, are the ones that are happening independently, that are being screened that are being funded by Screen Ireland, that are some are 100% funded out of Ireland. There's a couple of funding sources that you can get, that if you're making a low budget film of up to about €1.5 million, you can pretty much finance it completely out of Ireland. Once you go beyond that point, then you're talking, co-production, and you're partnering with producers in the UK or in Europe or in the US or Australia, and then you're talking a more complex relationship, but also you can do a lot more because you have more resources and you have more money. But there's always a high amount of independent productions going on, and I'm just back from Galway Film Fleadh in the last couple of weeks, and I was reminded just once again about how much fantastic talent we have in this country, all at the coalface, all making small, independent, massively high quality feature films, and we're working the skin of our teeth because it is very, very difficult to get them funded. But the more we do, the more we go out into the world with films like Colin and the smaller films, the more recognised we are, and the more chance that we will get involved in bigger films, and film production companies like mine will scale up. My first film was a very low budget feature. The next one is going to be significantly higher budget feature, and I'll continue to scale, as every company in Ireland, every production company in Ireland will do.
To give you a plug, if I recall correctly, last year when you were at Galway Film Festival, you won an award for one of your movies, one of the big awards, right? We
did, yeah. So last July 2023, we took a very small independent feature film to Galway, and it went down really, really well. We were delighted, and it won the best independent film in Galway, and that absolutely was our launch pad, because it brought us to 15 festivals around the world. We came away with 8 other awards over the course of the year, and we were nominated for 5 IFTAs, and this was for a very, very independent film.
And how does that movie then get monetized? So where has that been shown? Where does the revenue get generated for that movie?
So off the back of our success in Galway, we partnered with a sales agent whose job is to bring it to each country, and find a distribution company who will buy it, and they will bring it into the cinemas in that country. So our sales it's quite a lengthy process. The sales agent has to go country by country a lot of the time. So we've actually had our first release in the last couple of months to Aer Lingus. So if you're flying transatlantic or long haul to Aer Lingus, you can see Verdigris on the plane. I would prefer to see a big screen release.
Yeah.
And that's the next step, and where our sales agent is working with distributors in Ireland and the UK and the US and European countries to make that happen. So the plan is that will happen later this year, and that will monetize things, and that will bring in significant revenues.
That is a lengthy process, right?
Yeah.
Because you've been a multi-award winning movie for over a year now, and still not seeing commercial revenue. So that
Yeah.
must be tough then in terms of your own budgets, your own business, keeping money flow within your own company.
Absolutely, yeah. As I said, and from that point of view, the sooner the theatrical releases happen, the better it is for both myself and for the director, who's also a co-producer on the film. She's actually taken out a loan to finance some of the film, so I'd like to see that repaid for her as quickly as possible. So that absolutely I agree. The quicker it happens, the better. But you do have to kind of put those kind of calculations into your plans when you're doing your financial planning for the year or for the next 18 months. And ideally, it will come to fruition this year, and there'll be some revenues. But in our industry, it very much is nothing for a long time, and then a big lump of revenue, and then nothing again for another while.
Okay.
It's not like small other industries where you're producing an item, and you're producing a large quantity of those items, selling them, and having a constant revenue versus outgoing versus spend. In our case, it's very much, big gaps between payments and then the payments are due.
Which means you've got to be quite open to risk, because there's a large lump of risk in there in terms of you're waiting for money to come in and even trusting that the process will be successful.
Yeah, you do, and you're putting a lot of trust in people, in people that you partner with, and it brings you back to what I was saying earlier on, that you make sure you partner with people that you already trust. That it's not something that you just put your finger in on the page in the yellow pages and pick a person to work with, whether it's a sales agent or a director or a person in one of your departments. I said I'm currently recruiting for my next project, and I'm doing it largely through word of mouth, that I want to go and get people who either I trust, that I've worked with before, or who other people have worked with before. So similarly, our sales agent is somebody that I've actually known for quite a number of years. So when she approached us after our success in Galway, it did seem like a good fit, because she worked on films of similar scale. She knew how to operate on that in that kind of sphere. So she was the right fit. So hopefully she'll provide us with a couple of sales pretty soon.
But what's really interesting was that you have a solo self-employed business, right? But at the same time, it needs a team, it needs collaboration for you to succeed.
Yeah.
Because I think people frequently see self-employment as a lone person activity. But the reality is, you need to work with others. You need a team of people with you, if you are to succeed. It doesn't have to be a lonely pursuit. Even though there are moments of where you are on your own, where you are struggling.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's about team play.
Yeah, to be successful, you really have to collaborate, particularly in our industry, particularly on the creative side. And the more I do it, the more I realise how important it is. That my first big collaboration since I set up Branded Content was the director of Verdigris, because he's also a co-producer, so we're very much partners in every phase of the project, and we work very well together. I've actually known Patricia for probably 10 years, so it seemed like a good fit from the off. And as we worked together, I realised, first of all, how great it was working with Patricia, that we worked really well together, and secondly, how important it was to collaborate. And as we built the team and we produced Verdigris, and we worked with different people, from the crew through to our sales agent, and I assume our distribution people in different countries. I'm realizing how rewarding that can be. And similarly, on my next project, we're very much in the pre-production phase of that, and I'm working with the director, and we're looking at budgets and all the really exciting parts of film production. And I'm working with my core crew. I'm calling the writer, producer and what's called a writer director and what's called the line producer who does the budget. So that's kind of my core crew at the moment. And it's fantastic to be able to realise that it wasn't a fluke with Verdigris, that I'm able to move that skill set on and move those relationships on and create another team that will bring our next film to fruition.
Yeah, so it's not a completely new team every time. You can take some of that previous team with you and move on to the next project.
Absolutely.
One of the things I was wondering about is, like, when we think about screenwriting, or vision is somebody in a room on their own at a laptop. So how much of that work is lonely, is on your own, and how much of it is collaborative? Like, would you be sharing your writings with other people, and would there be different drafts over and back? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there is what it is, and there is what it should be. What it is, as you said, writers are working very much in solitary confinement. They're developing their stories and they're writing their screenplays and bringing those screenplays to the industry and hoping that it will be popular or liked, or somebody will pick up on it and somebody will choose to run with it and produce it. Apart from doing the best you can to be the best writer you can be, there is a certain amount of luck involved in that you will bring it to a number of producers, and they'll all have many reasons to say no, which are legitimate reasons. They may just not just like it. And I've had a couple of things where I've been brought projects where I've kind of go, it's actually quite a good script, but I wouldn't be able to do it justice. Then you get other scripts where you're kind of going, okay, I like it, but I'm actually working on something quite similar already. And that happens quite a lot because there's lots of kind of trends in the writing industry. So there are many reasons why we as writers we get told no, and most of them are not reasons to take personally, because it's actually nothing to do with the quality of the writing. But I would say absolutely a writer should spend time honing their craft, because I absolutely won't be interested in a screenplay that's not well written. And there are opportunities for writers to go and learn the craft purely by practice, but also by going do a screenwriting course, go do a screenwriting masters or whatever academic route you want to take. But by all means, practice. Write until do put in the hours, and maybe your first 2 or 3 scripts might not actually go anywhere, but your 4th script might be the one it's a great story and it's well written and somebody's interested in it.
I have a good friend who has an interest in writing plays and short stories, and he finds the process where people gather for a reading of the play hugely helpful, in that they read through the play and then it's like, and they feed back to him. It's a kind of a support group type activity, and they're throwing around new ideas. They're saying, okay, and even in hearing it, he himself is going to go, oh, that doesn't work there for me. And taking your work and looking at it from the lessons you've learned to, we say, a broader audience that would be watching this, what are the lessons that, well, first of all, can I ask, do you think that there are additional and distinctive challenges facing people with disability in starting up their own business?
Yeah, there absolutely are. From the point of view of this, like the social side of it, like I'm a big believer in, as any entrepreneur, as anyone starting a new business, you have to get out there and circulate within your industry. And in my case, in the film industry, there's actually no shortage of possibilities to go and network. There's plenty of events on, there's plenty of parties on, plenty of festivals to go to where you don't necessarily have to spend a lot of money to go. You can go and just go to films and go to the free parties that are on, or the free events. But unfortunately, it means that you do have to travel and you do have to be there. And for disabled people, there are certain limitations. Unfortunately, we haven't got to the point in this country yet where we're a fully accessible country. And many of the venues where these parties might be on, these events might be on, wouldn't necessarily be accessible. That does need to, it's better than it was, but it definitely needs to continue to improve. So there is the social limitations that you would have. There's also unfortunately a bit of a stigma attached to disability still. So people in whatever industry might look at you and see that you have a disability and automatically have a lower opinion, or have assume that your possibilities are limited in your industry. So therefore, they're not necessarily going to want to invest or partner or collaborate with you purely because you have a disability. And similarly, then with on the financial side, similarly to that, you might struggle to get investment in your company. I mean, investment's difficult to get for anyone, but there might be an additional challenge for disabled people who potential investors might look at you as a disabled entrepreneur and say, well, I'm not. My confidence in that person is affected by the fact that they have a disability. I hope that isn't the case, but I think it's out there.
And you used the term there, disabled entrepreneur. Would you see yourself as an entrepreneur or as an entrepreneur with a disability?
Entrepreneur first, most definitely. I don't really think about because I've had the disability since birth, as I said. I don't think about it an awful lot from that point of view. It does bring its limitations, and from the point of view of working the practical side of my job, working on a film shoot. There are certain considerations that would need to be made. For example, I'd always have to have a car if I'm on a film shoot. So if I'm working abroad, for example, there's an additional cost of I have to rent a car, I have to hire a car, and that might be for a month or 6 weeks, and that there are certain considerations there. So there are absolutely practical things that I have to consider, but I don't consider myself every day as entrepreneur with disability or disabled entrepreneur. It's entrepreneur first. I do the job, and when the disability, if there's an impact, I obviously take it into consideration, and I make whatever required changes, or I do whatever needs to be done to make it happen. I certainly don't let the disability stop me doing what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm. And you talked about people perceiving that you may not be capable of doing what you're doing, or they may not invest in you because they see somebody with a disability and have a perception that's we know to be incorrect, but that's their perception, right? How do you deal with that mentally? Like, how do you address that in your own mind?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure I've really had to deal with it all that much myself. And in fairness, the people in my community, don't seem to be impacted all that much. But at the same time, there are some days where I wonder: is it because of my disability that I'm still very much flying solo from a financial point of view? And that is there something to be said for that we need much more pointed investment for companies run by people with disabilities, because as I said, there are some days where I do consider have my efforts to bring investment into the company not been successful because of my disability. And then I tell myself, of course not, but I think it is out there, and I think it is a consideration. So to be honest with you, I couldn't say actually consciously how I've dealt with it, because I suppose I'm dealing with it more on a subconscious or unconscious basis.
Okay.
But it definitely is something that I would imagine a lot of disabled entrepreneurs probably see or have dealt with in the past.
What do you think then should be done by government, by enterprise agencies, by the film board, to support people with disability in terms of self-employment?
Well, certainly recognition in the first instance should be there by Enterprise Ireland, by local enterprise, and then more specifically to the industry that I work in, Screen Ireland, it would be great for them to recognise that there are a number, and it absolutely is not me. I know a number of disabled entrepreneurs within the film industry, for them to recognise that we're there initially, and to see if there is any additional support. Consult with us first. Don't just decide what they decide is best for us. And this goes for every industry. It does need to be a consultative process that to find out what it is that we're lacking as entrepreneurs, how we can bring our businesses to the next level. And I'm not necessarily talking about throw money at the problem. It really is a matter of support in relation to business premises, training, consultation about how to run the business from a financial point of view, and then also getting us mentorships with people in the industry, either or maybe both other disabled entrepreneurs, which you guys have done, and just people in the relevant industry to bring us on to the next step. I've had a couple of mentorships, one of which I had when I did the Disabled Entrepreneur course. Jill was absolutely fantastic, and now I'm in the process of a Screen Ireland mentorship, which is obviously much more focused at what I'm doing on a day-to-day basis. So mentorships are absolutely invaluable, and they're are very little cost to either the government agency who is organising them or to the mentor. It's possibly an hour once a month, and all it is the mentor relaying what they already know, to the mentee. But for the limited cost that it is to the provider, it's invaluable to the mentee. So that they would be some of the significant assists that I think should be forthcoming.
You particularly talked about recognition. Just for clarification, what did you mean by recognition? So what could be done to kind of to show that they recognise people with disability and the tailored support that's required?
Yeah, well, it's both for them to realise and to acknowledge verbally or in writing that it is in statements that disabled entrepreneurs are out there within possibly every industry, and for them to put forward programs or schemes that might be of benefit, and then, as I said, to engage in dialogue, in conversation with disabled entrepreneurs or disabled entrepreneurs groups, or TU Dublin who run the course, as a kind of a initial, as a funnel to bring in the people to make the connections. And once the connections are made, the disabled entrepreneurs are, they're not going to be shy. If we're asked a question, we'll give the answer, and it'll be an honest answer. And I think that will be the start of the process.
Yeah, because for me, in terms of recognition, I would add to what you're saying, in that I think websites should have universal design principles adopted, right?
Yeah.
Like, not all websites are accessible.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Promotional materials don't carry images of people with disability.
Yeah.
So therefore you're not visible in terms of the promotional material. And that's a simple one.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
And this notion of, if you can't see it, you can't be it, right?
Yeah,
Then it does. These, I think, are simple ways of recognizing a community that should be included.
And it's not just people with visible disabilities like my own. It's also people with neurological illnesses. And there are plenty of entrepreneurs out there who are operating, who are neurodiverse, and they absolutely need to be supported in the same way that somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with physical disability like myself needs.
What advice would you have for people with disability who are considering self-employment? Given your experiences as an entrepreneur, what would you anyone that's out there thinking of setting up their own business, what would be your advice to them?
Um, if I can mention one that from learning from my own mistakes, it would be know your industry very, very well. Know the business side of your industry very, very well. Ideally, it would be better to have worked within a company in your industry to gain hands-on experience, and then know exactly what it is you're offering that isn't already out there. And because in actual fact, I started off Project Conti with a slightly different idea that I was going to focus primarily on the development side of the industry, until I was told, first of all, that our country is too small and we don't really have that. We don't really have that requirement the way they might have it in the US or the UK. But that was kind of why I started the company, and then I just started production and in my first film, and it kind of snowballed from there. But it is important for anyone starting the business, whether you're disabled or not, is to know your niche in the market that you're going into, and know the overall industry as well, as I said.
That can be done by internship, right? Like a person, if they haven't worked in that industry, they could work for a company for a 3-month period, or try and get some form of.
Yeah, ideally, if you could get employment in a company, because once you're employed in the company, first of all, you're on a salary, and therefore they're gonna have demands on your time and on your faculties, and you are going to be working for them full time. As an intern, you're probably going to be an employee light, whereas you're not necessarily going to be given the level of responsibility an employee is going to be. You're not necessarily going to have the same exposure to the business and to the industry that you would have as a full employee. So ideally, if you'd be better off working in the industry as a fully fledged employee before you set up your own company, just in order, if nothing else, to see what it is lacking in that industry that is going to be the gap you're going to fill, because you really need to be doing that nowadays. You need to be really finding something that's missing, and providing that in order to set up a company in probably an already saturated industry. As a disabled person, if you're setting up a company, you also kind of need to see, depending on the nature and extent of your disability, whether from a practical point of view you'll be able to do it. And I'm not trying to be discouraging. It's absolutely great that disabled people, that there are disabled people wanting to set up business, because why not? But purely from a practical point of view, just to ensure that whatever industry that you want to work in, and you're going to be 100%, you might be 100% on your own for the first period of time. So just be sure and look into it to see that you're actually going to be able to physically or emotionally or psychologically manage to do it, because there's a lot of pressure in those opening months or years.
And I suppose also the recognition of the additional costs, because if you give the example, right, of hiring a car, that's an additional cost that other people would not have to endure. That there's always maybe some additional costs, maybe, or is likely, I presume, to be incurred.
Absolutely. I mean, you would say if you're setting up a business, your business involves premises, you're obviously going to need to make sure that whatever premises you go into is suitable for your needs, whether it needs to be accessible from a physical point of view, or whether it needs to have consideration made for a neurodiverse person. But it's an extra consideration that you're not just going to go into a building in inner city Dublin because it looks nice. It needs to be suitable to your needs as the entrepreneur.
We're about to wrap up. Any final words of advice for somebody watching who's thinking of setting up? Go for it, or go for it carefully, or
go for it carefully. Yeah. No, but I said I don't want to be sound like I'm discouraging, because I'm not.
No, this is an honest conversation.
Yeah, but absolutely do go for it.
Yeah.
But don't go for it blindly. Do the back work. Do the groundwork and spend the time and be patient. Absolutely be patient. because that is a lot of reasons why any new business fails, is that the person goes into it, when the entrepreneur goes into it, sets up the company without realizing that either there is no need for what they're offering, they haven't done the prep work, so they realize they don't realize they're not capable of doing it because they just haven't done the studies. So be patient and go and do some academics, go and study the area that you want to set up, because there's no such thing as wasted education, and there's always something to be learned about the industry, that even if you've been working in an industry for 10 years and you decide to set up a company within that industry, there's probably still learning you can do to make yourself better at it.
So do the market research, do your business plan.
Do your business plan, absolutely. We all hate the business plan, but unfortunately the business plan is something that, and it's pure, you might think you're doing it in order to go to the banks for investment or a loan, but you're actually doing it to help clarify your own business need in your head. I learned a lot about my own business, about myself and about my own business when I was doing the business plan, because I realized I was writing things that were contradicting other things. So absolutely, the business plan, it's a long and laborious process, but it's so clarifying for any entrepreneur to make themselves realize that maybe they need to change what they're doing, maybe they need to focus more on one side of the industry that they didn't realize. But the business plan is absolutely invaluable.
Yeah, I've always said that first and foremost you write a business plan for yourself.
Definitely, yeah.
And
everyone should do it. We should all write.
Yeah, because as soon as you put it to writing,
yeah,
it looks a whole lot different to what's going on in your head.
Definitely, yeah.
And particularly when you get to the numbers and you start putting together the financial projections, and you start valuing your time.
Absolutely,
and you start putting that on paper.
That was one of the first things I was told when I did set up the business was, don't forget to value your time. Don't forget to put a monetary value on your own hour, and then calculate your time on that basis. Because a lot of entrepreneurs will see themselves as the free element of the business. I know I'm the entrepreneur, so I'll spend 8 hours a day, 5 days a week working on this, while not putting any value on that. And that's just free. That's just a free resource. But you're actually not. You need to be giving yourself a monetary value in your own time and your own expertise as well.
Yeah, and I think that's good advice to finish on. Paul, thank you so much for being with us. And there's so much great learning in that, and I'm quite certain that people are going to take many really useful business learning points from it. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.